In the sun-scorched deserts of northern Baja, General Stand Watie rode to meet the Comanche and Apache leaders. They had no desire to fight a white man's war, but Watie spoke of the cruelty of the United States, of the broken treaties, the slaughter of women and children, the starvation campaigns waged against the Comanche. And he spoke of Mexico's betrayal, how Juárez's government had hunted and brutalized the Apache until their blood soaked the Sonoran sands. By the end of that meeting, a fragile pact was forged, one bound not by loyalty, but by a shared hatred of those who had tried to erase them. Far to the south, in La Paz, Colonel Santos Benavides watched over the growing Confederate settlement, its mines beginning to show profits, and its new docks rising under the direction of Confederate engineer Albert Miller Lea. From his network of informants came whispers of a coming storm, of Ellis and Juárez locked on a collision course that could ignite the entire continent. When New Year's Day dawned, Santos left the safety of Baja, entrusting command to General Sterling Price. He crossed the Gulf to Sonora, where he began rallying anti-Juárez rebels, Yaqui fighters, bandits, and deserters who saw in Ellis's rebellion a chance to strike back. Ellis's gamble, the dispatch of Joe Shelby and his Iron Brigade, was about to pay off. 2,000 hardened men thundered across the deserts of Chihuahua, Sonora, and Coahuila, burning garrisons, raiding banks, cutting telegraph lines, and seizing silver mines that fed the heart of Mexico's treasury. While Juárez sent his main armies south to crush the Yucatan uprising, Ellis was setting the north on fire.
Diaz was trapped. His once proud army of 17,000 now barely numbered 8. The rest lay buried in the swamps and fevered jungles of Tabasco. Cut off by General Nathan Bedford Forrest's rebel legion and encircled by Edmund Kirby Smith, who had retaken Tabasco's capital, Diaz was caught in a tightening noose. Diaz's only hope was to break through Kirby Smith's lines, reach Puebla, and rally what remained of Juárez's loyalists. But Ellis had other plans. From Campeche, he sent 3,000 Mexican prisoners, sick, wounded, and broken. The camp turned into a nightmare. Disease spread like fire, rations vanished, corpses piled in the rain. But with them came a letter bearing Ellis's mark.
In an abandoned plantation house strangled by vines and rot, the two men finally met. Ellis didn't come to demand surrender. What Ellis proposed was simple and treasonous: support for a new government, one led by Porfirio Diaz, a Mexico independent of Washington, a Mexico reborn from its own ashes. With Ellis's backing, Juárez's fragile hold on power would crumble.
You imperialists are all the same. You think you can take whatever you want. Tabasco, Chiapas, a quarter of my country. And here you are, and you ask me to help you do it. You have no idea what honor means.
Don't sit there and pretend you're the noble one in all this. How many people and how many tribes did you massacre since Mexico got its independence? The Yaqui, the Maya, the Apache, how many people did you wipe out simply because you wanted the land they were living on? These are your rules of war. And when you lose a war, there are consequences. Tabasco and Chiapas was paid for in Confederate Mayan blood. They are ours. Now, I'm not here to tell you that it's right. I'm not even here to tell you that it's fair. I'm just telling you the way it is. You have my offer. Now you can die here in the swamps with your pride and your map intact. Or you can lead Mexico with the honor as the next president. It's up to you. But you're going to learn very soon that I'm a man of my word. And I can be your best friend. Or I'll be your grave digger.
If Diaz had expected Kirby Smith to stay in Tabasco, he underestimated him. Leaving Forrest's legion to contain Diaz, he turned his main force toward Mexico's lifeline, Veracruz. Offshore, Admiral Matthew Fontaine Maury's fleet cut through the Gulf like ghosts of the old Confederacy, anchoring outside the massive walls of San Juan de Ulua. Inside, the fort's undermanned commander stared out to sea, his memory haunted by the bombardment of 1847 when Veracruz burned under American guns. Kirby Smith sent a single warning volley. No second volley was needed. The commander surrendered the city without a drop of blood spilled. Veracruz, the beating heart of Mexico's trade and treasure, was now in Confederate hands. Juárez had lost the north. Now he had lost the sea. The noose was tightening.
In Washington, the message arrived like a cry from a sinking ship. President Juárez's plea for aid was desperate. Veracruz was gone. Diaz was trapped. The rebellion he'd sworn to crush now threatened to engulf all of Mexico.
While armies clashed in the jungles and along the coast, another war was already being won in the shadows. For 2 years, Colonel Thomas Jordan moved through Mexico like a phantom, in the brothels and gambling halls, in the officers' messes and drawing rooms of the elite. Jordan's eyes and ears were everywhere. Politicians, generals, rebel leaders, even palace servants, all bound to him by gold, blackmail, or belief. He had spent 2 years planting the seeds. Now he was ready to light the fuse. Juárez's enemies were no longer across the border. They were in his own house.
Secretary Grant sent former Union General Lew Wallace south. His mission was to help Juárez keep order, hold what little ground remained, and buy time. The US elections were only 3 months away. Grant and the radical Republicans were poised to sweep the nation and seize total control of Congress. Juárez didn't need to win the war. He only had to survive it for 9 more months. Then, as president, Grant would no longer need diplomacy or deniability. He would be free to wage open war against Ellis and finish what the Civil War had begun.
By summer's end, Thomas Jordan's shadow war had come alive. Espionage, kidnappings, and assassinations tore through the heart of Juárez's government. With the economy in freefall, Jordan poured oil on the fire, flooding Mexico City with counterfeit pesos. Riots erupted. Newspapers, bought or coerced, fanned the flames, painting Juárez as a tyrant, a thief and a puppet of Washington. But Jordan's most dangerous weapon was already in motion. In the mountains of Zacatecas, a name long whispered in exile was stirring: Jesus González Ortega. Robbed of the presidency by Juárez, Ortega had become a living symbol of Mexico's lost republic. Now, escorted by Jordan's personal regiment of 500 men, he began a campaign, speaking in crowded plazas and haciendas to peasants and elites alike, calling for the restoration of lawful government. Garrisons of unpaid soldiers turned on Juárez and joined Ortega. The war was now burning through Mexico's heart.
Across the United States, the air was thick with anger and exhaustion. Reconstruction was tearing the nation apart once more. Radical Republicans waged open war against President Andrew Johnson, accusing him of betrayal, of letting the South rise again in new form across the waters of the Yucatan. To Johnson, Ellis's Confederacy was a strange sort of blessing. Every ship that left New Orleans or Galveston for the Yucatan carried away planters, officers, and restless young men, the very kind who might have fueled new wars at home. But to the radical Republicans, it was an unforgivable insult. Where Johnson saw stability, they saw treason taking root under another flag. They wanted not reconciliation but control, not understanding but punishment. Instead of mending the shattered South as Lincoln would have, they ruled it by force, bayonets and ballots, decrees and occupation. And in doing so, they gave birth to the very hatred they sought to bury. To them, Ellis was a demon who had escaped justice, a symbol that had to be destroyed. And now, they had the man to do it. An iron-willed general who had burned the South before and was ready to do it again. New laws sealed their power, and Grant sent his most trusted commanders south to hold Juárez's crumbling government together until he could come himself. Secretary Grant placed Philip Sheridan in charge of the operation. Sheridan enlisted General Joseph J. Reynolds to lead a force of 8,000 American servicemen, current and former soldiers, on a covert mission into Mexico. They would slip out of Fort McIntosh through the mountainous passages of Nuevo León, past the cities under Santos Benavides' control to transport arms, supplies, and enough bullion to bankroll a new Juárez army of 40,000 men. Reinforced and funded, Juárez would hold, buying Washington the time it needed.
But no one in Washington could have foreseen what awaited them on the road south. From the moment Santos Benavides arrived in northern Mexico, he had been waiting for U.S. supply envoys. Hidden among the ravines and deserts of northern Mexico, 2,000 Comanche and Apache warriors struck first. From the west came the Mayo, Kickapoo, and Yaqui rebels, driving the convoys into chaos. The caravans that carried Grant's gold and Sheridan's guns were turned into blazing pyres of fire and dust. The plains echoed with the thunder of hooves and war cries. And awaiting them still was Joe Shelby's Iron Brigade. In one night, Benavides severed the artery meant to save Juárez and left Sheridan blind to what had happened.
Ellis had done the impossible. The Yucatan, Tabasco, and Chiapas were no longer provinces of Mexico. They were the heart of a new nation, born in blood and fire. In Merida, John Breckinridge now governed in his stead, flanked by Beauregard, Forrest, and Gonzales. But Ellis knew time was running out. Grant was poised to bring the entire power of the United States to destroy them. As he prepared to march north, he told his officers simply, "This cause will live or die with me."
Leonardo Marquez, the brilliant, ruthless conservative general who had fought for Emperor Maximilian. Like so many of his comrades, Marquez had been exiled, hunted, and disgraced after the empire's fall. But now, in Ellis, he saw something more than rebellion. He saw revenge. The Confederate Republic of the Yucatán offered the Mexican conservatives a second chance. And for Ellis, they offered something priceless: local knowledge, disciplined veterans, and legitimacy among Mexico's powerful old guard.
But the United States wasn't the only foreign power moving its pieces. Across the Atlantic, France watched with quiet fury. Grant's hand in the fall of Maximilian still stung Napoleon III, and France's once proud influence in the Americas had been shattered. Ellis's rise offered an opportunity to reclaim it, not through conquest, but through shadow power, immune to the Monroe Doctrine that had once banished them. Napoleon's envoys moved quietly, brokering arms deals, discreetly arranging ships, and recruiting 3,000 veterans of the French Foreign Legion. These were the same hardened men who had fought in the Battle of Cameron, who had stared down death in the deserts of Mexico and lived to remember it. Alongside them came survivors of the Zouaves of death, led by the indomitable François Rochebrune, a soldier's soldier, eager for one more righteous war. France would not march beneath Ellis's flag, but its hand was in every weapon, every rifle, every bayonet that followed him north.
Yet Marquez offered one warning. Ellis's greatest weapon, his 7,000 Mayan warriors, must remain in the Yucatan. The jungles had made them unstoppable, but in the mountains of central Mexico, among wary locals, they would be seen as invaders. Instead, Marquez promised he could raise 3,000 new troops from conservative bastions around Mexico City itself. Ellis agreed, and with only 300 of his fiercest scouts and cavalrymen, he set off toward Puebla, the last stronghold of Juárez and the key to tightening the noose around Mexico City.
By October 1868, Mexico was a nation on the brink of collapse. Yet Juárez would not yield. He rallied what troops he could still command, and he swore to defend the capital until the last man fell. By December of 1868, the winds had shifted once again. In Washington, Ulysses S. Grant had been elected president, and Juárez's government had held on by sheer will, waiting for March, when Grant would take office and deliver the full weight of the United States against the Yucatan settlement. But fate turned in an instant. From the south came Porfirio Diaz. When he entered Mexico City, the crowds hailed him as a savior. And before night fell, Diaz made his allegiance clear. He recognized one president only, Jesus Ortega. Juárez was arrested. Ortega, assuming power as president, named Diaz as the president of the Supreme Court of the nation. Diaz's ascension to the presidency was cemented, just as Ellis had promised. In return for Ellis's aid, Ortega fulfilled his promise, ceding the Yucatan, Tabasco, Chiapas, and Baja to the Confederate Republic. In exchange, Ellis relinquished Veracruz and pledged compensation to rebuild Mexico. And in one final act of defiance, President Andrew Johnson, in his final months in office, sent an envoy to sign an executive peace treaty with Ellis, making it nearly impossible for Grant to wage war on the new republic. Ellis had won. And against all odds, he had turned exile into empire. The war is over. A new republic is born. Now, a new struggle begins. As Ellis transforms from soldier to statesman, he steps onto the world stage, regarded with both fascination and intrigue. But across the Gulf, President Grant watches with growing fury. And as Ellis turns his eyes east, his next conquest would shape not just the destiny of the republic, but the balance of the entire hemisphere.
No forgiveness here, no saints that pray, just the loaded gun and the price I paid. The blood on my hands, cold as stone, and now I face the end all alone. This night ain't died with fire in the sky, no savior to come to just the devil's cry. Our city is lost, no need to now, bound in the grave, I lay dying. Oh, cigarettes burn in cold gray light. I hurt myself just to feel alive.